The screams echoed down the cold, dark hallway of Rikers Island. A guard's flashlight flickered against the concrete walls as he ran toward the noise. The air smelled of bleach, metal, and fear. In cell block D, inmates were banging on their doors, shouting words that made no sense. "He's gone! He's gone!" someone yelled. "They took him!" another voice screamed. When Officer Daniels finally reached cell 47, the light from his flashlight stopped on something that made his stomach twist. The cell was empty. No sign of the inmate who had been locked there just hours ago. The security camera above the door was smashed, wires hanging loose like torn veins. The cell floor was wet, not with water, but with a trail of something dark and sticky that led straight into the air vent. Daniel's hand trembled as he grabbed his radio. "Control, we got a situation in D block. Inmate missing. Possible breach." His voice cracked as the lights above him flickered again. For a moment, he swore he heard whispering from the vent, soft, almost like someone calling his name. He turned quickly, but no one was there. Then, something heavy dropped from the ceiling behind him with a loud thud. The guard spun around, flashlight shaking in his grip, and what he saw made him drop it. The light rolled across the floor, stopping at a blood-stained shoe with an inmate tag still attached. The same inmate who was supposed to be locked in cell 47. To be continued. Hours earlier, before the chaos began, Rikers Island looked like it always did, grey, grim, and full of secrets. The prison sat on the East River between Queens and the Bronx, surrounded by water that shimmered like steel under the morning sun. It was supposed to be just another day for Officer Daniels, who had worked there for 6 years. He knew the sound of clanging metal doors, the echo of angry voices, and the cold smell of sweat that never really left the air. But that morning felt different. The air was tense. Inmates were whispering more than usual. Even the guards seemed uneasy. Rumors had been spreading about something happening in the lower levels, places that weren't on the official map. One of the inmates, a quiet man named Terence Cole, had been asking strange questions. He was serving 10 years for armed robbery, but lately he had stopped talking about his release. Instead, he asked about the tunnels under Rikers, old passages said to connect to hidden cells from decades ago. Daniels brushed it off as inmate gossip, but when he made his rounds that afternoon, he noticed something odd. Terence's cell door wasn't locked properly. The latch had been tampered with. Inside, the man was sitting calmly on his bed, staring at the wall where faint words had been scratched into the paint. They never leave. They disappear. When Daniels asked who wrote it, Terence only smiled and said, "You'll see soon." Later that night, during shift change, alarms suddenly blared. An inmate was missing. Terence Cole. The security cameras on his block had all gone dark at the same time. No one saw him escape, and there was no sign of forced entry or exit. As the search began, Daniels remembered those words on the wall. They disappear. He didn't know it yet, but that night would expose something far darker than any crime he'd seen before. Something buried deep within Rikers Island itself. Just as the guards gathered outside D block, the hallway lights flickered once again. The smell of smoke filled the air, and the sound of a metal door slamming echoed from the far end. When Daniels turned toward the noise, he froze. A shadow moved behind the bars, tall, thin, and wrong. Then a voice whispered from the dark. "Officer Daniels. They're watching." The sound sent chills crawling up his spine, and before anyone could react, the emergency lights went out completely. The prison was swallowed by darkness. The power outage threw Rikers Island into total chaos. Darkness covered everything like a thick blanket, broken only by the occasional flash of a flickering emergency light. Alarms screamed from somewhere far off, echoing through the cell blocks. Inmates shouted, banged on their doors, and some even laughed. It was the kind of laugh that came from fear. Officer Daniels gripped his flashlight tight, his heart pounding so loud he could hear it in his ears. He tried to call for backup on his radio, but all he got was static. The system was down. No power, no communication, no help. "Stay calm," he whispered to himself, though his hands shook. He moved slowly toward the sound of metal scraping against the floor, a long, dragging noise coming from the far end of D block. When his flashlight beam caught movement, he froze. Someone, or something, was crawling out of the vent. The body slid forward like a snake, arms pulling, legs limp. When the face came into view, Daniels gasped. It was Terence Cole. His prison uniform was ripped, and his skin looked pale and wet, like he'd been underground for days instead of hours. "Terence?" Daniels called out, stepping closer. "What happened to you?" The inmate lifted his head, his eyes wide and glassy. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but only a faint whisper came out. "Don't let them take me back." "Who?" Daniels shouted. Terence's hand pointed behind Daniels, trembling. "Them!" Daniels turned fast, but no one was there. When he looked back, Terence was gone, completely gone. No footsteps, no dragging sounds, just the echo of the emergency sirens and the steady drip of water from the ceiling. Daniels backed away, breathing hard. He needed to get to the control room, find the others, and figure out what was happening. As he hurried down the corridor, the lights suddenly blinked back on, flooding the block in harsh white light. Everything looked normal again, except for the vent cover lying on the floor and the faint trail of wet footprints leading toward the elevator shaft. In the control room, 3 guards were arguing. Officer Grant, an older man with a rough voice, looked up as Daniels burst in. "Where the hell have you been?" Grant barked. "We've got 2 inmates missing now, not 1. 2? Daniels repeated, confused. "Yeah. Cell 39's empty too. Cameras down all over D and E blocks. Power flickered like crazy. Looks like sabotage." Daniels' stomach sank. He remembered Terence's warning, "Don't let them take me back." Grant was typing fast on the computer, trying to pull up the manual security system, when something strange appeared on the screen. A grainy video feed flickered to life from one of the old basement cameras, the ones supposedly shut down years ago. The footage showed a long, dark hallway lined with rusted doors. In the middle of the hall stood a figure wearing a prison uniform, motionless, facing the camera. Daniels leaned closer. "That's him," he said. "That's Terence!" But before anyone could respond, another figure stepped into the frame behind him. Tall, shadowy, with glowing white eyes. The screen glitched, then went black. All 3 men jumped back. "What was that?" Grant muttered. Daniels swallowed hard. "We need to go down there." "You're out of your mind," one guard said. "That area's been sealed for years. Nobody goes down there anymore." But Daniels couldn't let it go. Something was wrong, terribly wrong, and he needed to know what was hiding beneath Rikers Island. With his flashlight in one hand and a spare keycard in the other, he made his way to the lower-level entrance. The hallway grew colder with every step, and the smell of damp concrete filled his lungs. The sound of dripping water echoed like slow footsteps following him. At the bottom of the stairs, the air was heavy. Thick pipes ran across the ceiling, and the walls were stained with dark streaks that looked like old blood. Daniels found a rusted sign half buried in dust. It read, "Restricted access. Experimental ward." He frowned. "Experimental?" A sudden loud bang echoed behind him. He spun around, shining his light up the stairs. But no one was there. Then the metal door above slammed shut on its own, locking him in. He was trapped underground. And from somewhere in the darkness ahead, a low whisper drifted toward him. "Welcome back to Rikers, Officer Daniels." The flashlight flickered, and a shadow moved across the wall, fast, too fast to be human. Then came a scream so loud it made the pipes rattle. And the light went out again. The sound of the scream echoed through the underground hallway until it faded into silence. Officer Daniels' heart thumped wildly as he tried to switch his flashlight back on. It flickered weakly, revealing damp walls and rusted pipes, but no one in sight. He called out shakily, "Who's there?" His voice bounced off the walls, sounding small and alone. Then, drip, drip, drip. The sound came again. Not water this time. Thicker, slower. When he shone his flashlight toward the noise, he saw a trail of dark red liquid running down the wall. Blood. Daniels stumbled backward, breathing fast. He turned down another corridor, trying to find the emergency exit. The deeper he went, the stranger the place became. There were doors sealed shut with metal bars, some half open, showing rooms filled with broken hospital beds, old restraints, and medical tools coated in dust. On one wall, words were carved deep into the concrete. "They tested on us." Daniels froze. Tested? He leaned closer, tracing the letters with his light. Then he noticed something else. Handprints. Dozens of them, smeared along the wall like people had tried to escape. He whispered, "What the hell happened down here?" A soft noise came from behind him. He spun around. A shape was standing at the end of the hallway, barely visible through the flickering light. It looked human, but its movements weren't right. The figure tilted its head, then started walking toward him, slow, unsteady. Daniels pointed his flashlight straight at it. "Stop! Don't move!" The figure stopped for a second, then spoke in a low, broken voice. "You shouldn't have come here, officer." Daniels recognized that voice. It was Terence. "Terence, what's going on?" Daniels demanded. "Where did you go? What's happening down here?" The inmate stepped closer, his face pale and eyes wide with fear. "They never closed this place," Terence whispered. "They said they would, but they didn't. They just moved everything deeper. They're still doing it, still experimenting. I saw them." "Who's them?" Daniels asked, heart racing. Before Terence could answer, a loud metallic crash shook the hallway. Lights above them sparked, and the floor trembled as if something massive was moving below. Terence's eyes filled with panic. "It's too late. They know you're here." Daniels grabbed his arm. "We need to get out, now." They ran through the hallway, their footsteps echoing. As they turned a corner, they came to a large steel door with a keypad. Daniels tried to swipe his keycard, but the screen flashed red. Access denied. Terence banged on the door. "They locked us in!" Behind them came the sound of heavy breathing. Not human. Slow, rasping, almost mechanical. Daniels turned slowly, shining his light down the corridor. Something stood there, tall, wearing what looked like a tattered guard uniform. Its face was covered by a cracked gas mask, and its hands were soaked in blood. Daniels aimed his flashlight higher. The mask had the words, "Ward B Security," scratched across it. The creature took one step forward, then another. Daniels shouted, "Run!" They sprinted in the other direction, but the hallway ended in a dead end. Terence slammed his fists against the wall. "There's no way out!" The creature's footsteps grew louder, heavier. Daniels could hear the sound of metal dragging against the floor. His flashlight began to dim again, flickering as the figure drew closer. "Terence," he whispered. "What are they?" Terence looked at him, tears in his eyes. "They're the ones who never made it out. The ones they changed." Suddenly the lights above exploded with a loud pop, showering sparks. The entire hallway plunged into darkness. Daniels could feel something cold brush against his shoulder. He swung the flashlight up just as it flickered one last time, and caught a glimpse of the creature's face right in front of him. It wasn't wearing a mask anymore. The skin was pale and stretched too tight, the eyes empty but glowing faintly white. Its mouth opened slowly, wider than it should have been, as a deep rattling voice came out. "Officer Daniels, you belong here now?" Before Daniels could move, the thing lunged. He shouted, firing his stun baton, electricity crackling through the air. The creature shrieked, a sound like metal grinding on glass, and vanished into the shadows. Terence grabbed his arm, dragging him through a side passage. "Come on! There's another way!" They ran through a narrow tunnel, crawling under broken pipes and fallen concrete until they reached a heavy door that looked newer than everything else. Terence pulled it open, and bright light spilled through. Daniel squinted, stepping inside, and froze. Rows of metal tables stretched across the room. On each one lay a person, some in prison uniforms, others in guard outfits. They weren't moving. Wires and tubes ran from their bodies into humming machines. In the center of the room, a monitor displayed a chilling message. "Experimental ward active. Subjects under observation." Terence whispered, "Now you know the truth." And then, from one of the tables, a hand twitched. Daniels turned just as one of the bodies sat up, eyes glowing white. The machines began to beep faster, and the door behind them slammed shut. The sound of the door slamming echoed like a gunshot, bouncing off the metal walls of the underground lab. Officer Daniels and Terence froze. The room was now locked from the outside. Beep, beep, beep. The machines attached to the bodies started pulsing faster, the heart rate monitors spiking wildly. One by one, the people on the tables began to twitch, their eyes fluttering open, each one glowing that same sickly white. Daniels backed up slowly, his voice shaking. "Terence, what is this place?" Terence swallowed hard. "This is what I tried to tell you. They used inmates for experiments, testing drugs, brain scans, and things not even medical. Some of them died. Others didn't." Daniels looked around. "Didn't what?" "Didn't stay dead," Terence whispered. A deep humming filled the room as the overhead lights flickered. One of the subjects sat up fully, turning its head stiffly toward Daniels. The sound of its neck cracking echoed through the lab. Its voice was calm, but hollow. "You shouldn't have come here, officer." Daniels grabbed his stun baton again. "Stay back," he shouted. But the thing only smiled, a twisted, lifeless smile. Then the others began to move, sliding off the tables, their bare feet slapping the cold floor. Their movements were jerky, unnatural. Terence yanked Daniels toward a side door. "There's a maintenance shaft. We can get out through there." They ran across the room, dodging tables and wires. A body lunged at Daniels, grabbing his sleeve. He swung the baton hard, sending a flash of blue light and a burning smell through the air. The figure convulsed and fell, but another immediately stepped forward. Daniels and Terence reached the small door, pried it open, and crawled through into a narrow shaft filled with pipes and steam. The heat hit them like a wave. Daniels slammed the hatch behind them, panting. "What were they trying to make?" Daniels asked as they crawled through the dark tunnel. Terence's voice was low. "Perfect control. The prison was their cover. They tested ways to erase anger, violence, even fear. But something went wrong. Instead of calming them, the serum made them hollow. They lost everything human." Daniels wiped sweat from his forehead. "And the guards?" "Some of them knew," Terence said. "Some helped. But the ones who didn't disappeared. Just like the prisoners." The tunnel forked into two paths. Daniels looked at Terence. "Left or right?" Terence pointed left. "That should lead us back to the yard." They started crawling again. The sound of metal scraping echoed faintly behind them. Daniels turned, shining his flashlight. Something was following, fast. He could see a hand, pale and clawed, reaching through the darkness. "Move!" Daniels shouted. They scrambled forward, bursting through a metal grate and landing hard in a basement hallway. The air was cold and thick with dust. Ahead was an elevator, the old service one used decades ago. Daniels pressed the button. Nothing. He hit it again, harder. Still nothing. Behind them, the sound of footsteps grew louder, slow, steady, and wrong. Then, with a ding, the elevator doors slid open.
Inside stood a man in a black suit, wearing a visitor's badge that read, Dr. Keller, Department of Justice Oversight. Daniels stared at him. "Who are you?" The man smiled calmly. "You've seen too much, Officer Daniels. You were never supposed to be down here." Terence grabbed Daniels' arm. "Don't trust him. He's one of them." Dr. Keller stepped closer, his eyes cold. "Rikers isn't just a prison, gentlemen. It's a research facility, and you've just walked into the core of it." Daniels raised his baton. "You're experimenting on people." Keller tilted his head. "On criminals. On the violent. On those no one will miss. Isn't that what the system was built for?" Before Daniels could reply, the lights flickered again, and behind Keller, the elevator shaft went. "Dark!" A whisper echoed from inside it. Keller frowned. "What?" A pale arm shot out from the shadows, grabbing him by the neck and yanking him back into the darkness. He screamed as the elevator doors slammed shut, blood splattering the floor. Daniels and Terence stood frozen. "Run," Terence whispered. They bolted down the hallway as alarms blared. Red lights flashed overhead, and a robotic voice echoed, "Containment breach! Lower levels compromised." Daniels spotted a staircase and ran for it, Terence close behind. As they climbed, the ground shook. Pipes burst above them, spraying steam and sparks. When they reached the top, they pushed open a heavy door and stepped out into the prison yard. But it was empty, silent. The guards' towers were dark, the gates wide open. Smoke drifted across the yard like fog. Terence looked around, breathing hard. "Where is everybody?" Daniels scanned the area. "They evacuated." He stopped. "Or worse." Then, from the far end of the yard, a figure appeared, one of the guards limping toward them. Daniels ran up to him. "Hey, you okay?" The guard looked up slowly. His eyes were glowing white. He smiled a crooked smile. "Welcome to the new Rikers, officer." And from behind him, dozens more began to emerge from the shadows, guards and inmates alike, all walking in eerie silence, eyes glowing like ghosts in the dark. Daniels raised his baton, his breath shaking. Terence whispered, "We're too late." The crowd began to move toward them, in perfect unison, like one single body. Daniels took one last step back, gripping his weapon tight, and then the prison lights went out again,